as you see potential in people, I've seen this in you in the very few conversations that we've had, and then also listening to your book, I can tell that you're one of those people who sees potential, and you can help people see the potential that they can't see. You uncover that for them. What are some of the situations that you've seen that hold people back from taking on the role of being queen? What are the blockers that prevent them from really moving forward?
Number one, self-permission. People hold themselves back because they're waiting for someone else to give them permission to speak up, take the lead, say no, set a boundary, think bigger, totally go for it, invest, get a mentor, any of it. So self-permission is probably the biggest one, and all this combined with it, they're probably equal tied. It's an equal tie, is belief. Belief that it can happen, belief that it will work out, belief that they do have what it takes, uh, belief that it is possible. And when you combine belief with self-permission, you become unstoppable.
And that's exactly what everybody wants. They just sometimes don't know how to get there. It's the idea of you have to first uncover what it is that you want, and then you have to keep pushing yourself forward to make sure that you continue to live in that self-permission. I find myself, and I don't know if you do this as well, but I find myself in certain areas giving myself a lot of permission, and then other areas I'm not as open to it because there are things that block me. So it's not a a la carte, or it's not a carte blanche process. It comes more individually than I think I would have assumed that it would have.
Yes. So ultimately, that long list that I gave for both feminine and masculine energies, if you were to boil down femininity to one word, it's about receiving. And if you were to boil masculinity down to one word, it's about giving. And something I write a lot about in the book also is the injured feminine instinct. Somewhere along the way, and you can sum up anything that's not functioning at the level that you desire in your life, comes down to your inability to receive, particularly in that area. It's your inability, it's the injured feminine instinct that your femininity isn't as strong as it's naturally meant to be. But the good news is femininity is an energy, which is like a muscle, and it can always be strengthened and it can always be built. Just because it's been ripped or broken or atrophied doesn't mean that it can't come back. And so when I started this process, the injured feminine instinct was like everywhere I looked in my life. Like I had an inability to receive financial support. I wasn't charging my worth. I was offering sliding scale rates when I was a psychotherapist. My inability to receive love, totally went chasing after all the wrong guys. My inability to receive attention, a compliment, even visibility as an industry leader. So there were all these broken, wounded, atrophied areas in my life that I had to realize that I was so much more comfortable in the masculine. I was so much more comfortable giving a compliment. Not that I was giving people money, but purchasing things, right? It's like, so in that sense, giving the money, giving other people time and attention or validation or the spotlight. And so, masculine and feminine, it's like breathing in and breathing out. We've got to be able to do both. And to the degree that we, particularly as women, have an awkwardness around receiving support. We've been told like we got to figure it all out on our own. Like life gets so much easier when you have a mentor in any area of your life. Whether it's about business or you want to learn to knit or cook or whatever, but that's about receiving support, receiving guidance, receiving expert advice, and valuing yourself enough to actually, very likely most of the time, invest in that. Now, not always, because sometimes you're asking for help to receive help, and that can be awkward. To share with you in full transparency, I know Danelle was so wonderful to introduce us, but it's, if this had been me probably even a year ago, I wouldn't have done this. But I saw on Instagram stories, I saw Danelle on your podcast, and you looked really cool, and I looked you up, and I was like, this woman's awesome. And I went and asked Danelle, would you introduce me to Natalie? And because I've worked on my receiving muscles, I was able to give myself permission to receive that support, where before I would have been like, oh no, well, I don't know if, Natalie would have me on her podcast. I shouldn't bother to not, like, all of these like lame, low vibrational, archetypes that show up in our lives. I like to talk about like the martyr or the ghost, or the roller coaster rider who starts and stops. Like there's all these different, the paranoid gangster who's like, all these like just old limited ways of thinking that do not serve us, that didn't even come from us in the beginning. They were trained into us. We developed them through psychological conditioning. We get to undo them. And when you heal them and get great at receiving, life gets so much easier and so much more fun, and beautiful connections like this are made.
And it's just still wild to me that as mature adult women who just believe in all of this, like, I love your transparency. I felt the same so many times where I'm like, oh, I don't really know if I should make the ask to do that. I'm still plagued with that today. It is not as if, and I try to, talk about this often with the audience of just because we happen to be on this podcast does not mean, and we're talking about these things, and correct me if I'm wrong, or because you've written a book, doesn't mean that all of these things are just perfect for the rest of life. Like, you still struggle with them and figure out how, in certain areas, again, you're thriving, but in other areas, it's like, dang, how is it that I am this age and I've done these things, and yet I'm still worried about making the ask, because what if whatever that limiting belief is comes out and somebody thinks I'm a fraud, or who knows what.
It's astonishing. It is astonishing that not just us individually, but societies of an entire gender, guys aren't like this though. You're like, I can't even imagine my husband saying like, oh, I don't know if I should ask for that introduction. Like that. We would just, and he wouldn't even ask. He would like find someone. If it was him and Danelle, he would be like, Danelle, introduce me to Natalie. Yes. Like, just zero apology, totally direct. No, like, hey, I'd really appreciate it if, or because like my book tour has gone virtual, that like no explanation, no anything, no apology, just boom.